Yeah, it's called Conversations with Jeff, not Screaming Matches.
Yeah, you and I do not agree on Calvinism. But look how nice we are to each other.
I think it's going to really shock a lot of people, thrill a lot of people. A lot of people are going to have to do some soul searching.
It's like, you know what? What are you doing? You're spending all your time trying to destroy another Christian day because you don't understand what's going on, when you should be out there winning people for Jesus.
Right.
Thank you for the job you're doing. Thanks for being willing to address these kind of issues. They're vital to the church.
I feel sorry for what's coming your way, but God bless you, man. It's a good, healthy conversation, and let's keep growing together in the Lord.
People won't change unless they hear the truth, though. And so we need to know the truth, speak the truth, and then the last one I would say is that we need to stay in the truth, no matter what the consequences are.
Okay, guys, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations with Jeff. We're bringing in a guest today that I'm assuming most of you guys didn't expect to see over here on Conversations with Jeff. But most of you guys probably saw the article that I wrote a couple weeks ago about Tim Hurd and Jeff Durbin and Apologia and that whole thing where they released a secretly recorded phone call and posted it on YouTube to try to essentially intimidate and silence Tim and a whole bunch else. But I wanted to have Tim on to discuss this whole fiasco because I think it's really important for all of us to understand some of these tactics that some of these guys can use, and we need to be able to see through this, see this kind of abusive behavior, this mentality. But yeah, we'll kind of break all this down together with Tim. But yeah, Tim, thanks so much for coming on, and welcome to Conversations with Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Actually, I'm the one who came to you in this situation. I appreciate you opening up your platform for me to tell my story, to tell you what's going on, because I know it's something that is a concern to you and to your audience. It often is abuses of leadership. And I actually haven't, in my church life, I don't experience it, haven't experienced it. I've always had shepherds who shepherd, who lead their flocks rather than beat them or mistreat them. But yeah, I wanted to talk about, there's things that I wanted to expound on a platform where people are concerned about these types of activities by elders. But in doing so, if you don't mind, I'd like to go over the timeline of my engagements with Jeff Durbin. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course. And I think that's important, just that way, again, people are understanding what's going on, why it's happening, and just kind of understand the context and all that.
Yeah. All right. I'll start out with when I started Bible Thumping Wingnut Podcast in 2014. Jeff Durbin was one of my first guests. I think he was on episode 4 and 5 way back in 2014. We had a good relationship. Really appreciated Jeff and his willingness to come on and his apologetic ministry. At that time I did. I was really was learning the presuppositional apologetic method and learning about theonomy, learning about postmillennialism and other things. And in 2015 through 2016, I came to disagree with Jeff on theonomy, on postmillennialism. And then there was the theonomy debate with Jordan Hall and Joel McDermott, and things got really heated in that time period. 2015, 2016, a lot of heated conversations. And one of the stance that I took was that preaching the gospel interwoven with your postmillennialism, I took a firm stance that that was a false gospel. All right. And that was a narrative that I was pushing forward, and it didn't help the conversation. And I have since learned and I know there's people who will watch this who disagree with me because they will firmly agree that the preaching of postmillennialism along with your gospel, the gospel of the kingdom, the way Durbin does it today, I'm sure there's people on my platform that still disagree with me. They're like, no, Tim, it is a false gospel. But I don't think that's helpful. I do know and understand that they understand how a person becomes right with God. So saying it's a false gospel, it doesn't help. I now say that they have an over-realized eschatology. They don't like that either. But as we're saying they have an over-realized eschatology, they'll say that I have a unrealized or incomplete or neutered gospel, which isn't helpful either. But anyway,
well,
so
what I was going to say really quick with that is it's entertaining the labeling that goes back and forth, and in all reality, it happens in almost every debate where there's like each side will kind of like summarize the other side in a way that makes that kind of refutes their argument without actually dealing with it. And whereas I think that because I've heard some of your stuff talking about this, of dealing with apologia on this theological issue. And I think it's better to, just like what you've done, is actually break down the arguments. And I wish that like Apologia would do that with you, and I wish more people would do that with them. And so that I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that that's an important aspect of debating a lot of these theological issues.
Right. Yep. Good. Yep. You're right about that. So that was the whole theonomy thing, and during that time, I was trying to argue against Durbin and others, and I presented their arguments, and sometimes I presented their arguments in as poor of a way as I could to try to defeat them, and I would make much of little, and it wasn't good. I was not presenting their arguments the way I should, and I wasn't handling the conflict the way I should. So that conflict happened in 2016, and then it died down, and we didn't engage much. And then May of 2017, I felt really bad for what I had done. I felt convicted. So I reached out to Jeff Durbin. Like during all that in 2016 of all that debate and all the back and forth, they were calling me out for sin, and I was stubborn. I didn't recognize my sin. So a lot of the charges that they said against me weren't true, but some of them were. So in May of 2016, the Holy Spirit pressed upon me. I needed to repent. I needed to reconcile. And that's what I did. May of 2017, I called Durbin, and actually he put me on speakerphone, and I was talking to Durbin, Marcus Pittman, and the other elder at the time, Luke Pearson. And I just poured my heart out. I owned it. Dude, I owned it. When I apologize, when the Holy Spirit breaks me, I own it. There's no excuses, right? That's the way it should be. So this is a good thing when people humble themselves and realize they're wrong. It's something to be celebrated, right? It's good. It's healthy. It's a work of the Holy Spirit. So I did that. May of 2017, they said that they forgave me, and we moved on. And one of the things that came about as a result of that conversation was I had an avenue of texting Jeff if I had any questions in the future. So from May of 2017 till the beginning of 2019, we had 16 different engagements. 16. Now, don't hold me to that number because I'm thinking off the top of my head. And these people will take a quote like I just did and say, wait, no, there weren't 16. All right. There were multiple, all right? There were multiple engagements on a text thread where I came to him, I said, hey, what about this? And we talked about it and we worked things through. Or I said something to him. There's a whole debate about eschatology in there. There's a whole debate about Matthew and Daniel and everything. And we go back and forth and we disagree. And at no time since May 2017 has Durbin said, hey, I need to talk to your pastor. None of that has happened. Sometimes I bring something up and he'd explain it to me. I'm like, hey, I really appreciate that. That's great. So we've been talking back and forth about maybe once every 3 or 4 months, right? So, and then this past summer, May of 2019, a few people sent me a engagement that Durbin did on the Tinfoil Hat Podcast, which is a podcast by secular people. And Durbin went on there with somebody else from Apologia Church to be interviewed about their podcast called Cultish, right? Mm-hmm. So they go on this. Did you know about this?
Yeah, I didn't watch it myself, but I definitely did hear about it.
So a couple people sent me the podcast and said, hey, you need to listen to this. You need to listen to this, and you should do a review because it's pretty notable that Durbin didn't share the gospel in a 1-hour podcast when the hosts were teeing it up. I mean, the hosts of the show were like, hey, man, I'm not a Christian, but I know I do bad things. And I know there's judgment coming one day, but man, those people are pedophiles. They're really bad. And instead of saying, hey, there is judgment coming, you need to think about your own sin. All Durbin did was say to these secular podcast hosts, you have no standard for truth. How can you know truth at all? How can you say the pedophile is any worse than you are? So it was a good opportunity to critique and to challenge my audience. Hey, always be ready to preach the gospel. So I did that show July 21st. It was Bible Thumping Wingnut is an apologetic podcast. We critique apologetic methods. And Durbin says I can critique him. So I critiqued his apologetic method. And it's interesting, he has not mentioned one iota my critique of him on this. But I would encourage people to go to watch that. It's on my YouTube channel. But that was July 21st. And I did 3 follow-ups to that, reading feedback. And my last one was August 13th. And August 13th, at the end of it, I praised Durbin for how well he preaches the gospel sometimes. I played clips of him. I clapped. I rejoiced. I was like, man, that's awesome. It's way better than I could ever do. That was August 13th, Jeff. August 13th. And I heard nothing from Durbin about those videos at all. Didn't expect to, and I didn't. That was August 13th. No text message, no private message at all. We have had since 2017. And then on November 11th, 90 plus days after that review, that 4-video review, Durbin posts my apology, my confession of sin on a anonymous YouTube account. And his explanation for that, like on your last podcast, you were speculating whether Durbin actually released it. Yeah, it was him. He admitted it. He admitted to privately, unbeknownst to me, recording a phone conversation, creating an anonymous YouTube account, and posting my confession, which includes a third party, me talking about a third party that's not involved in the conversation, and talking about that third party's personal situation. That's up on YouTube today, thanks to Jeff Durbin of Apologia. So he explains that the reason why he posted that is because he had no choice. He was left with no choice. Tim's back to his slandering, and Tim's a slanderer, false witness, all these things. and he never came to me about it. Never came to me about it. Never asked for when he did his. I need to slow down so that we get this. We get the timeline right.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can, if I'm not clear or anything, you can just interrupt me and say, "Wait a minute," for clarification.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
So, I Google myself every now and then, right? Everybody does. Well, those of us, Jeff, I'm sure there's times you search, see if anybody's responding to your content. So you'll search your name on YouTube, see what comes up.
I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, nobody that I know ever does that.
Yeah. So I do that. I do that to see if I have any content that, is feedback and maybe I could respond to. So I did that within a week of it being posted. And I saw like only 40 people have viewed it, and nobody's sharing it. Nobody's sharing it on Facebook. It seems like somebody just put it up there, and it has a whole description with it that talks about how it's just assertions, how I have returned to my slanderous ways, right? Just assertions. But that 4-video critique of him was really different tone than the way I treated Jeff in 2016. Way different. And so I saw the post, and then I contacted Jeff after it'd been up for over a week. I said, "Jeff, why is that phone call of my confession posted publicly?" And his response was, "I need to talk to your pastor. You're a slanderer. You're lying again. You're up to your old ways." And I said, "Well, what have I done wrong? Can you please tell me? What have I done that I the way I have addressed you is way different than before? I mean, I was very gracious. No, I need to talk to your pastor." I said, "Hey, Matthew, if you want to do Matthew 18, come to me first. Come to me first." "No, I need to talk to your pastor," and on and on and on. And the next day, I'm on Facebook. I don't know if it was the next day. It was the same general time period. I'm on Facebook in a private message with a friend who is just an acquaintance, right? I don't know this guy. He's my friend on Facebook, though. And I'm having a private conversation back and forth addressing something that he said. And out of the blue, this guy sends me a message, says, "Oh, Dr. White wants me to let you know he has heard the phone call." Like, what? I said to the guy, "Well, I know what he's referring to, but I wanted to see if I can get some more back." So I said, "What phone call?" And then the guy's like, "Well, he's like, I don't know. He just told me to tell you that." What was that, Jeff?
That sounds, I mean, obviously in different context, that sounds like a mafia movie. Like some guy walks by and so-and-so said that he heard your phone call. Like that seems like that would be like something you'd see in like The Godfather, not in something that would be happening in the church.
Yeah, I took it as no, I mean, Dr. White's come forward about this. He's like, "Oh no, that was just like a Matthew 18 wake up call. Like, hello, hey, I know that." I can't even piece it together, but that was his explanation. His explanation was, it was kind of a wake up call. Like I know what you said.
Yeah, you know what that actually is. That's actually them admitting of gossiping and spreading information about you behind your back, and in that, you know what I mean. Like that's basically what that is, because it's not like James White was involved with that conversation.
Right, and he wasn't even part of Apologia Church when it happened.
Right.
So I had it at that point. I'm like, you are not going to hold this over me. So I made it public. I went on YouTube, and thankfully over 10,000 people have watched it. I went on YouTube and recorded a podcast called "A Warning to the Members of Apologia." And at that time, I didn't realize it. I didn't realize the full impact of this, but So I don't know how long it was, 45 minutes or an hour, but I just laid it out there. I laid out kind of what I've said to you thus far, and said, you know what? If you're a member of Apologia Church, you better be careful, because I wouldn't be surprised if Jeff is recording you. And then Durbin did a response a week later, which was 3 hours long, in which I counted them all, 213 times. I think I wrote it on it. No, I didn't. It's over here. Here it is. 213 assertions, 68 times. 68 times he said I was a liar. 49 times guilty of sin. 31 times I'm an abuser. 24 times I've misrepresented him. 21 times I'm a slanderer. 13 times I'm a victimizer. 7 times I'm guilty of false witness. I'm sure I counted wrong, but that was my 213. If you just took the assertions, it would be over 15 minutes of just saying, Tim, you are. Anyway, it was way over the top. It was way over the top. And I had no idea what was happening in the background, because, this is true. I really think that this is true. And you've seen it, and the Survivor blog people have seen it. The Me Too movement has seen it. All it takes is one person to stand up and say, you ain't going to do this to me anymore. I'm going public. And Jeff, at least 2 men have said to me, when you said what you did, it was an answer to prayer. These are one of them was never a member of Apologia Church. One of them left in good standing, but they had similar experiences with Durbin. And they're like, now I can tell my story. Now I can let people know. And they came to me. I did not go looking for anybody. All of a sudden, people's phone numbers are being sent to me, and they're like, hey, I want to talk to you. Hey, I want to talk to you. And I've talked to many people for hours. I've sat across the table at Chick-fil-A near Philadelphia with a man broken to the point of tears because of what has happened. And you know what? I'm not the person to compile these people's stories. I'm not a writer. And because of my history with Durbin, anything I do at this point is discredited. Oh, because you already admitted that you were guilty. And that is a stinking theme with the way the leadership of that church works. Once you say you're guilty, once you go to them and say, hey, I was wrong here. I have heard testimony after testimony. All of a sudden, you're on the phone and you start talking about you were guilty of something, and you hear things being hooked up. You hear things being plugged in. Okay, what were you saying? You're being recorded is what's happening. And then these recordings are kept. And then if you have any critique, any negative critique about anything, well, you already confessed. You already confessed of having poor judgment. You already said you were guilty. And if these charges and these stories are true, there's no possible way in anyone's biblical thinking that Durbin is anything but disqualified as an elder. And these stories are serious, and they're not They are not from. The people that I've talked to aren't people who were put under church discipline. They're I can't say everything, but if these stories are true, it's real serious. So why hasn't the information come out? Why am I being vague? Because the people writing the story are talking to everyone who wants to tell their story and then going back and double checking, making sure, are these people telling the truth, or are they just people who had a little bit of a scuffle with the elders and had to leave, so that's where I'm at. That's where we're at.
Yeah. Well, I think, for me, and, not going to get into that, but I've had similar experiences to you in the sense of, I stand up and I say something, and then other people follow up and they send me messages and they're like, hey, this is happening to me, kind of going on down the list. And it is crazy that, like you were saying, one person takes a stand. And so like you took a stand against apologia and said, look, I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not gonna go silent just because you try to intimidate me into silence. And then all that does is that gives somebody else confidence, like, oh wow, he's willing to take them on. Maybe I can help. It's weird that it's just nobody really wants to be that first person. But once the first person goes, then a flood of people will come following. And I think that is important for all of us to remember as well, is that if something is happening, and you believe that even though it's happening just to you, but there could be wider implications, like in this. Yeah, Tim, this is just happening to you, right? You're experiencing this, but they're also doing this to other people. So if you can tell your story, then it gives other people confidence that, wow, maybe I could tell my story because this shouldn't be happening to people. And the more that people are aware of this, the better, because then it slowly takes away their abusive power. From my perspective. So that's just kind of like my take on all of that kind of stuff as well. By the way, I'm looking at comments over here on Facebook. Dustin Faulkner said this is why people don't go to church leadership anymore, just because they don't trust them, which I think depending on the church leader, that can definitely be a concern. Now, I wanted to ask you this question that Sam Jones just asked on Facebook as well. Do you think that this is just an issue with Jeff Durbin, or do you think this is a symptom of a greater problem of the church at large?
Before I answer that, I want to say, like when people were listening to me and listening to Durbin and listening to my reply to Durbin, Durbin did a 3-hour plus slander fest of me, right? And then I did a 22-minute response. That I would encourage folks to watch. But I demonstrated, he edited the clip to make me look guilty. And when people saw that, they're like, wait a minute, he recorded me too. And when he made the recording public, he edited that. He did the same thing. And I'm dumbfounded by it. And then the whole, Tim, you already said you're guilty. You have already admitted it. There are quite a few people who are like, that's my exact experience as well. So, and before I answer that question, the problem is who's going to report this, right? Is Christianity Today interested? No. I mean, who's Jeff Durbin, right? Jeff Durbin's interesting for the people who are in our reformed bubble of apologetics, and he's big in that bubble. But outside of that, people aren't interested. Pulpit and Pen is interested because that's what they do. They went after Greg Locke, exposed Greg Locke. They went after Clayton Jennings, exposed Clayton Jennings. And this is what they do, right? They can talk to these people and expose it. But it's Pulpit and Pen. So some of the key figures that are telling their stories are like, Tim, I know you're right and everything, but I don't want my story told on Pulpit and Pen. I want it to come out on something bigger. I'll tell you my full story if you guarantee that Pulpit and Pen won't be the first ones to publish it. Like, can we go to Christianity Today and say, here it is, here's the story, print this story? Like, I understand what they're saying, and I know there's the stigmatism of Pulpit and Pen being the narrative of it's a slander fest and all this, and to that's just an assertion. Bring some evidence of that. But in our little bubble of Reformed theology, if Dr. White's ministry and Durbin's ministry is a big part of your bubble, then no, you don't want Pulpit and Pen to come out with your story, because everyone will just discredit it because it's Pulpit and Pen. It's like somebody who disagrees with you, Jeff, on your critique of Grace to You, like myself. Like, it would be like me to just discredit everything you say because I firmly disagree with you on that front. All right? And I shouldn't do that, because if you were to come out with something, I should weigh it on the evidence that you're bringing forth.
Right.
So let me take a breath and answer his question.
Yeah.
I don't think that the practice of recording is a wide problem, because I have yet, and J.D. Hall and others, we're challenging other pastors to come forward and say, I do that too. I record my members. And Durbin, in his 3-hour thing, he said he doesn't record his members. He does. I have talked to them. I have heard the sound clips that he sends to people and says, you already confessed to this. All right. Anyway, I don't think that's a wide problem, because every now and then somebody on Facebook is like, I know this guy over here who's a pastor or an elder, and he says you can do it. I'm like, okay, introduce me to him. You're not a pastor. He wasn't a pastor. But I've yet to find one. So I don't think that is a broad problem. Heavy shepherding, like not leading your flock, but more like abusing your flock, I can't tell you how prevalent it is. If you listen to Jeff the GK, you think it's all the time. You think it's really prevalent. I don't. I have not experienced it. And maybe there's people who, I'm sure there are people who have experienced it and over again, but it hasn't been my experience or the experience of most of the people that I know. So what do you think?
I've probably seen it more than you have, I'm guessing. And I think from my end too, kind of like what you were talking about with, once you take a stand, people will reach out to you and tell you their stories. That's what's happened to me. And so from that perspective, then that becomes, I have to take a look at from my perspective of making sure that I'm not only relying on all the negative stories and saying that, look, all these pastors and every single pastor in the entire world is an abuser and whatever, because that can be the narrative, especially with a lot of like the survivor blogs and things like that. So that's something that I have to weigh and have to say, okay, is there valid evidence for that? Just kind of like what you're doing with Apologia and how people are coming forward to you. So yeah, I mean that's my take. I think that it's more prevalent than I think you think, but I think you and I run in different circles, and historically we have different people coming to us with information, I think. So that's just my 2 cents. Now let me ask you this. So let's step past the issue of the secretly recording. But do you think that there is a wider issue with, and I know you were kind of talking about like heavy shepherding and things like that, but do you think that there is a wider issue with, maybe it's even within the mega churches as opposed to like the everyday churches, of there being intimidation or trying to silence all forms of criticism as opposed to engaging in arguments? Because that's what I'm seeing happening here with Apologia and Jeff Durbin, is instead of engaging with your arguments, they're just trying to silence you and discredit you. Now, do you feel like that's something that is possibly more prevalent in the wider church?
I just don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
I have gone to many churches. I used to be in a ministry where I met with scores of pastors every year. I worked with in a parachurch organization where I was working constantly with other churches throughout New England. For 10 years, I was with Word of Life Bible Clubs, and I was training leaders in churches on how to minister to children and teenagers. So I was meeting with these people on a monthly basis and running conferences where these leaders were coming. And to be honest, faithful shepherds doing the best they can, admitting when they're wrong, growing with their flocks, leading their flocks, loving their people, doing the best they can. And it has not been my experience that, like, this type of insulating yourself to criticism. Like, I want to in one way say, hey, I'm a member of a little church here, and like, these things don't happen, but it's been my experience in every church I've been in. So I'm blown away with this.
Yeah.
Like, at first it was like, all right, Durbin's done me wrong. He did this, and he's not telling the truth. So I made my 22-minute video, and that should stand on its own. Wait a minute, I didn't tell you this, Jeff. I don't block people, right? I don't block people. I don't ban people.
Well, let me just say this. Let me just say this. You are the first person that I've ever had on my podcast that is currently blocking me as we're having the conversation. I'm just throwing that out there.
All right. That's you're where do I have you blocked?
On Twitter.
Well, okay. So, okay. But I did that because you blocked me. And then you were commenting on my stuff, like Rich Pierce is doing to me now. Like, that is the most crazy thing on Twitter is, like, Jeff could decide to block Tim, so now I can't see your comments, but you're still looking at my content and commenting on it. And I can't see what, like, that made no sense to me. So somebody's like, hey, if you don't want Jeff to comment on your stuff secretly, you have to block him. So that's why you were blocked, sir. Okay. So, but you have unblocked me, and I guess I have to unblock you. So yeah, so the interesting thing is, why are we working together on this? Which was my question. Why were you working with JD, or why was JD working with you on the social justice thing? There's times when we come together because there's something bigger than my disagreements with you, right? And when judgment comes, when persecution comes to us, and we're starting to get our heads chopped off here in Christianity, I'm in that bunker with Brandon House, and we're buddies, okay? And with Durbin, when persecution at that point comes, we're all true Christians are going to be like, we're bonding together. So sometimes we come together, like on social justice, or when someone in Durbin's situation should be called out for what he's doing.
Well, and let me throw this in there too. I think that part of this too is that I think when we get into these kind of like apologetic debates or debates over issues within this whole discernment world, if we want to call it that, right? I think that it's really easy when you're engaging in these Twitter fights or podcasts going back and forth to have things blown up out of proportion, right? And then it becomes that person is all bad because we disagree on this one issue, right? And whereas I think that, like, with you and I think you and I right now, we could say, like, we disagree on my critique of John MacArthur and Grace to You, right? That's a fair thing, right? And I think that you would strongly disagree with me, and you would say that I'm totally wrong and I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing, and that sort of thing, right? but I think that what we need to do is we need to take a step back and realize you and I can disagree on that one issue without completely discrediting each other overall. And then I think that we can then come back and say, look, we disagree on this MacArthur Grace to You thing, but over here on this Apologia Jeff Durbin thing, we're in agreement. So instead of totally discrediting each other 100%, it's like, let's pick and choose. Here's the disagreement. Here's the agreement. We unify around the agreement. We separate over the disagreement. And I think that that's the principle I think that both you and I are looking at here. That's what I was looking at when I was deciding whether I want to go to the Stand Against Marxism conference with J.D. Hall, because J.D. and I have had our issues and our feuds back and forth and that sort of thing. We disagree on some of those things, but we agree on the unification principle of the partnership. And I think that that's where you and I are here when it comes to this whole Jeff Durbin thing.
Yeah, you're correct. We agree on that. What I was saying about blocking people, it's been my practice for a long time. Bible Thumping Wingnut Facebook group is just like the Wild West. We've got all kinds of crazy people in there who disagree, and they're going to disagree no matter what we say, but we've always engaged with them. And when Durbin did his 3-hour rant about me, and then I took about 25 hours to make my produced 22-minute response. My response to Durbin had to be produced so I didn't get sidetracked, so I didn't go on a rant. Just the facts. All right, 22 minutes. And it literally, for me to produce a 1-minute video, it takes me at least an hour. So every minute takes an hour. So I literally took 20 plus hours making that video. And in it, I mean, if you cannot see that Durbin was actually lying and slandering me when he looked at the camera and said, Tim, you know it. You know you're lying. He's actually lying. He actually took, and I demonstrated how he dishonestly edited a clip of me to make me say something I didn't say. And then I addressed the 5 points that I thought main points that he had, and just proved him wrong on his other major charge against me. I mean, there's no way you can watch that clip and still think Durbin was honest. So when somebody gets on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook and responds to that 22-minute clip and says, why are you going after Durbin? You just don't like Durbin. Guess what? I now block people. I now ban people because there's no help for people like that. If you're a fanboy to that extent, I'm sorry. I have no time for you. I do not. I'm done. Jeff, I'm done. Atheists have done crap like this to me. People in your camp have disagreed with me, even when I thought it was very clear that I made an excellent point. Different camps, but this is it. This is if you're a Durbinite to the point where you can watch that 22-minute clip and say, Tim, you said that Jeff doesn't preach the gospel, or you said Jeff didn't come to you. Like, I can't help him. So that's the point of frustration that I have.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do so yeah. Now I block people.
Well, welcome to the club, Tim. But so the point that I wanted to bring up though about a lot of this as well is dealing with this strategy that they're trying to employ to come back at you for your criticism of them, right? And I wrote an article about this, and I basically compared what they're doing to Scientology and how Scientology treats critics of them. And that goes even the parallel with your confession to Jeff Durbin and then them secretly recording it and then releasing it is virtually identical to how Scientology does auditing. They take down your confessions and you admitting all of your weaknesses. They take intense notes, and then they file them. And then if you ever criticize them, then they'll come out with websites, fake YouTube accounts, fake Twitter accounts, videos, everything, taking little snippets out of context in order to make you look bad, to discredit you to the public. We saw them do that with like Leah Remini, Mike Rinder, any former Scientologist that comes out. And then they'd use this exact same strategy that Jeff Durbin is using against you. And it's crazy to me that somebody within Christianity is essentially using the exact same tactic that a cult is using. That's nuts to me.
And a lot of people really appreciated you pointing that out, because putting those two together is important. Even right now, Jeff, Twitter knows, not Twitter, Skype knows right now that it's important for me to have a little alert right now above your head on my screen. It says, Jeff is using a device that could record or broadcast this call. Privacy is important, right? If we're being recorded, we should know about it. And there is no reason at all why anybody would have to record step number 1. All right, Matthew 18, the first step. If you got a problem with somebody, or you notice somebody's in sin, you go to them, right? Why do you go to them? Why don't you just broadcast, blow them up on YouTube? Because you want to win them. You want them to repent. You want them to realize their sin, and you want to renew them. You want Christ's blood to cover that sin. And when that happens, when you go to your brother in private, hey, you have this sin, you need to deal with it. So he repents. It's done, right? It's done. And to record something like that is wrong. It's sin. And if the reports are true, Durbin does it all the time. If what they're saying is true, which I believe it is. I want to talk to you about Matthew 18.
Yeah, because I think that's an important thing that I think we need to define.
Because one of Durbin's major points was that we tried to reach Tim. We tried to talk. Tim said J.D. Hall is Bible Thumping Wingnut, one of the board members and the point man for this type of a discussion, right? So JD takes it very seriously, because he didn't take it seriously once, and his church called him out on it, and he repented. He had to admit that he entertained gossip wrongly, and he was confronted, and he repented, and he's very concerned. He is very concerned about Matthew 18. So if Durbin was to come to him and say, hey, let's talk about Tim and his 4-video review from this summer, how do you think, Jeff, he would respond? Because you had a similar situation, did you not?
That I did, and that involved that involved you, and I went directly to JD after you and I had been going back and forth. And I wrote about this in my article too, and JD had said you can share this and all this kind of stuff. So I'm not just dumping this on you, but I went to JD and I said, hey, look, there's this issue. We need to deal with this, and he took it very seriously, and he made sure that we talked through things. He made sure that we did things in the right biblical manner. That the issues were dealt with you first, and then we're trying to deal with things as a group. He did a very good job of trying to handle Matthew 18 in the best biblical possible way, and I think that when there's the critique that he's not going to listen to any criticism of Tim Hurd, or because they're friends or whatever it is, it's like, well, I know firsthand that he was willing to take it on and do it the right way, and so that's something I totally commend him for doing.
So on my end, all right, JD Hall comes to me and says, "Hey, Jeff Dornik has an issue with you." JD and I are friends, right? We're not only ministered together, but we're buddies, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, JD, no, I'm not talking to Jeff Dornik. I'm not talking to him. I tried to discredit you, and I said, he's going to waste our time. He said, no, Tim, this is when the call's happening. You will be on this call. No, I'm not. I'm not talking to him. And even an hour before, I'm like, JD, really? Seriously? This is Jeff. Come on. I'm not going to be there. He's like, yeah, you are. I came kicking and screaming the whole time. I did the buddy thing. Hey, come on. Are you serious? But he did take it seriously. So that whole narrative that, JD ignored Jeff's concerns about me is false.
Oh yeah. I mean, 100%. Not, and JD and I have talked about just about this issue, just with this whole thing with apologia as well. And like the thing is that it's like, the way that it was done with him, it was not the same way that how I approached him. The way it was done with JD was essentially gossip and just like, hey, check this out. Kind of, almost reminiscent of how James White talked through a third party to get to you. Hey, I listened to this phone call. That's not how you do Matthew 18. You know what I mean? There's a difference. You go directly to them and you deal with this the right way. And so if anybody failed in that aspect, it's Durbin and Apologia, in my opinion.
We could debate whether Matthew 18 applies, over the internet. We can debate that, but why not apply it, right?
Well, I mean, it's a general principle.
If I have access to you, why not, right?
Yeah.
But like if I think that Joel Osteen's in sin, I mean, I can't go to him. Like, even if I knew something personal, like somebody contacted me, I wouldn't be able to contact him. But yeah, we want to expose blatant, unrepentant sin, but we also want, to win. We want people to grow in their faith and in their sanctification. So that's why we would go to them if we knew they were in sin.
Yeah. Well, I think that leads into this idea of when does Matthew 18 apply and when does it not, especially because when we're dealing with pastors. And we also have to remember, too, is that we're so interconnected now with social media and the internet and all of that, to where people are pretty much sinning against each other all around the nation on a daily basis on Twitter. You know what I mean? So then it becomes, okay, so how do we deal with this, right? So if we're dealing with something where like a prominent pastor, let's say, says something wrong from the pulpit, obviously you're not as an apologist or whatever it is, or a discernment guy, going to go and talk to that pastor privately before you write publicly, clarifying your position on that issue. And that's primarily because you want to protect the church from that false teaching, right? But if there's a personal sin issue where they're personally, let's say slandering you or lying or whatever it is, that should be dealt privately first, unless they're going and blasting it for all to hear. And it's like, that's a public sin that needs to be dealt with publicly from my perspective, because it's like, if you spend all this time trying to go to them privately for however long that's going to take, I mean, by then the damage is done. There's nothing more that can be done in order to rectify that situation, in my opinion. And so that's where it kind of comes into this. We have to kind of define as the church, when does Matthew 18 apply? When does it not? And kind of be able to figure out how all this works, because I feel like it's almost like a case-by-case basis to a certain degree.
I think another thing that should be talked about really is, where's the balance between this is an awesome ministry, and all right, this particular sin, that ministry, that person should not be a part of it, or that ministry needs to cease. I think back to Charles Stanley. When his wife divorced him, I understand that's the way it happened. When his wife divorced him, he stayed in ministry. Should he have stayed in ministry? A lot of people made biblical arguments that he should not. But what came out from the leadership of the church, of which I knew one of them personally, the response was, because of the vastness of the ministry, he stayed in position. Because of the vastness of ministry. I think that there's a conversation, or we need to really think about it. Like, if somebody is saving, if an elder is abusing his flock, and it can be proven, I don't believe we can say they have a great ministry anymore, even if hundreds of babies are being saved from death, even if you have a great apologetic against Mormonism, right? Because that is the response. That is the response of many. Yeah, I see what he's doing, but yeah, he's got a great ministry. He's got a great ministry. I don't think that can be said.
Yeah, well, I think going through this experience, which is fascinating to me, is I think a lot of these arguments that you're making are things that I've been saying for the last couple of years.
I know. I see that little smirk on your face right there.
Yeah. Hey. It's literally like you're directly quoting me from the last couple of years.
Yeah. I secretly listen to everything you say.
I figured
and take notes.
Yeah. No, but I think it's important. It's an important thing that I think we need to understand. I think this kind of goes back to how you were talking about, like, the Durbinites and the celebrity mindset, is that people, I think, are so invested in their favorite celebrity pastor. And so, like, in this instance, it's dealing with Jeff Durbin, right? They're so invested in him, and that he's done so many amazing things, and he's been faithful for so long. And then all of a sudden, that overshadows any moral failures that might come along. It's this argument, well, they've been faithful for the last however many decades, or they've been faithful and they've saved so many babies, or he's preached expositionally for so long, he's such a great pastor, whatever the argument is. We have to remember that past faithfulness does not override current unfaithfulness. Like, there's certain... yeah, go ahead.
We can apply the same thing to... all right, so if the charges are true about Durbin, everything we're saying applies, right?
Yep.
But think of the Clayton Jennings issue, all right? Clayton Jennings having premarital sex, doing all kinds of sinful actions behind the scenes, but every night he's standing in front of hundreds of people preaching the gospel, albeit a synergistic gospel with a sinner's prayer, and hundreds of people are being saved. Or he's putting it out there that people shouldn't be considering suicide and people shouldn't be down on themselves. So a lot of people are choosing not to commit suicide and giving their testimonies of, you saved my life, you saved my life. And then Pulpit and Pen exposes these sinful sexual activities of Clayton Jennings, and thousands of people are like, he saved my life, he preaches the gospel. How would those people ever be saved if it wasn't for, they're not Calvinists, they don't understand the way God works, but I wouldn't be saved if it wasn't for Clayton Jennings. So where there's a line there somewhere. Like, regardless of how it appears that God's using you, that there are some disqualifying things that even though that's taking place, you've disqualified yourself. And that was my case. That was my case. How many years ago now? It's been 18 years since I was a pastor, and I disqualified myself. But I was such a great speaker. But you really ministered to my teenager, or you did this, that, or the other thing, or you're really good at organizing this event or whatever. All that doesn't matter anymore. Like, you're disqualified. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that line? Like,
well, the thing is that when we look at Scripture, we look at the qualifications of a pastor and elder, right? They're very clear cut. It doesn't involve whether you're an entertaining speaker or how many years you've been in ministry or anything along those lines. There's very specific qualifications that are listed, and if you break those qualifications, you're no longer qualified for ministry. Then the argument could be made, and is made by many, that, you know, for some people they'll say if you become disqualified, you're permanently disqualified. Other people will say you could be restored, you know, through biblical repentance and that sort of thing. And that's a whole different conversation. But right now, in this specific issue with Durbin and James White and Apologia, they've broken some of those qualifications of an elder. So then it becomes, why does all of a sudden now past faithfulness override the fact that they've disqualified themselves from ministry because they're unrepentant for those specific things that are listed as qualifications? I think, you know, there's like arrogance and being quarrelsome, and I mean, clearly they're being quarrelsome in what they're doing to you, because all they're trying to do is stir up drama, right? And then they're unrepentant about it and digging their heels in about it. Like that's crazy.
I think and we need to make sure that if we're saying somebody's disqualified, we need to make sure it's not subjective. It's not just an opinion. It needs to be very clear, very obvious. The evidence needs to be very strong. You know?
Yeah.
Not speculation. So
yeah,
it's a serious, you know, it used to, this whole thing, after talking to all these people and still communicating with them, it's really not about me at all. I mean, I'm kind of ticked off. I'm not happy that recording is still up. You go to YouTube and search Tim Hurd, it comes up. It's one of the first things that comes up. It's private stuff, and it's personal stuff. It's stuff I talked about on my podcast. Like, I could say more, but it's more about the members of Apologia now. And I think I referenced it before. A couple left the church, and their friends called them up and said, how did you leave? How did you leave? Because it's not easy to leave. And some people would say that's good pastoring. There are people who say, you know, you're overseeing that person's soul. So if they're going to leave, you need to know why, and it needs to be a valid reason. There's an argument for that. But I know for a fact right now that there are people in important positions that want to leave. But it's just going to be difficult to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, to bring it back to the, you know, relation to Scientology and it being a cult. I mean, when you're in Scientology, you sign I think like a 1,000,000-year contract. So even in all of your future reincarnations, you're still a member of the Church of Scientology. It's virtually impossible to get away in their mind. There's a lot of parallels going on there. Wanted to ask another question off of the Facebook comments. Dustin Faulkner asked, do you think that the understanding of eldership has been misused? I
don't understand the question. By who? By
I would say by them in the sense of, and I think that this is maybe a broader question of dealing with kind of the church in America today. Is I think most churches aren't necessarily looking at the biblical qualifications for being an elder. They're looking at, is he an entertaining speaker? Does he fill this specific role of being able to let's say expositionally preach, or is he able to write books? Is he able to organize events? Things like that. And I feel like to a certain degree here, we're looking at, you've got Jeff Durbin, who's a charismatic speaker. He's got a following, but that's not a qualification. And so I think that's probably what Dustin's asking there.
I'm not a Presbyterian, but the denomination I'm in, I think my church is actually like a Presbyterian church. We have a higher council. We have a superintendent of our area who oversees all the churches in the area and works with the churches. Like, should we have a problem with our pastor, we can go to them. Right? So that's a benefit. These types of abuses are guarded against in my denomination and in the Presbyterian denomination. But in a independent Reformed Baptist church with no governing body over the churches, a pastor like Jeff Durbin can insulate themselves with people who will agree with him or give in to whatever he wants, whatever direction he wants to take. They'll say they're accountable, but that's an opportunity. That's a problem waiting to happen, really. Wouldn't you say, with an independent church like that?
Yeah. Well, there's. If the leadership becomes corrupt or prideful or arrogant or sinful, disqualified, there's no way to biblically deal with it if it's the leadership that's failing. Because Matthew 18, you're supposed to be going to the leadership of your church as like the final steps. Well, what happens if the leadership's unqualified and your issue is with them? And that's part of the problem. I get to a certain degree why churches want to be independent of, let's say, a denomination, because there can be at times where the denomination is overbearing and they're corrupt and they're being sinful, and then you're like, okay, now really what do we do? But in principle, I think it's, you look at Acts, and you had the apostles in Jerusalem. They were that kind of overarching, like, final group of people you'd go to if you had an issue within your church. You couldn't deal with it with your pastor biblically. You would go to the apostles, and we saw that exemplified, and then they would try to figure out, okay, what's the biblical way of handling this? And so I think that's where maybe Apologia is failing, is they're not actually accountable to anybody. I
like how Dustin put it on Facebook. It's like, it's a posse, not an eldership.
Yeah.
We all roll together.
It's a good way to put it.
I think about, like, James White. I'm talking off the top of my head, but so in my best recollection, James White put up a post on Facebook the other day, or maybe it was Twitter. He's like, "This is, imagine my day. This is what my day's like. I call another elder, Zach. I call Zach, and we're talking on the phone about all the slander that's going on and how to deal with the slander that's going on, and then I hear in the background, she changed her mind. And Zach's at an abortion clinic, and while they're talking about the slander going on, a baby's being saved. So unfortunately for the elders at Apologia, they have to deal with all this slander while they're saving babies. That's the narrative. All the while, what's actually going on behind the scenes is, Jordan referenced it to a Mexican standoff. Like, you're not going to make that public, are you? You can't make that public. Oh, yeah? What do you mean we can't make that public? Well, because of the people who are involved. You can't make that public. Just wait. We might not make it public, but somebody else might make it public. Like, there are some serious issues going on, and they're very damning. And it's all posturing right now.
Yeah.
And that's why on Twitter, and I knew Durbin's wife was reading my tweets, that I pleaded with her. I'm like, please, like, repent. You know the evidence. You know what's out there. And I'm not shooting blanks here. Like, they know. Here I am sounding like Jeff Durbin. You know you're lying. But I wish I could say more. And a lot of people will watch this and say, Tim, you said too much already. But you don't know what I know. Like, it's bad.
Tim, trust me, I understand the feeling, because I'm in this exact same boat in different areas. But I will say this: I think that one of the things that we need to remember is, like, when they're claiming, oh, Tim is slandering. That's a way for them to discredit your message without actually having to engage in the argument, right? And so I think that one thing that I think that we could do here as well is we need to define what is slander and what is not slander, because that term is thrown around a lot in this whole polemics, discernment world of, oh, you criticize me, now you're slandering me, right?
Here's what I want, and here I have repeated it on this interview, and I've repeated it every day. That's an assertion. Saying somebody slandered you is to say that they're lying about you. That's what it is. You're slandering me. You're saying something that is untrue. Okay? So that's a fine assertion. And you can assert that all day long, but show me the evidence. Show me. Don't just say you're slandering. You're a liar. You're a false witness. You're a victimizer. Don't say that. Give me the evidence. Stop throwing out, you're slandering me. You're slandering me is not a response to what I've presented or what's being presented. It's just an assertion.
And disagreeing with somebody is not slandering. And I think that's something that I think we need to remember is, if you disagree with somebody and let's say what they're teaching, right? If a pastor's preaching and you disagree with what they're saying and you articulate your argument that's a counter argument to what they're saying, that's not slander. That's you disagreeing and having a different perspective on what God's word says. And I think it's really easy to say, oh, well, you're saying that I'm wrong. That means that you're slandering me. It's a cop-out. It's a way to get around having to actually defend your position and then just putting it back onto you to discredit you so that way they don't have to deal with you. And I see it all too much happening in the church.
And opinions aren't slandering either.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Tim, you look stupid in a hoodie right now. Like, that's not slander. That's your opinion.
That's objective. You know I'm kidding.
Yeah. Like Jordan puts out his opinion all the time. And it's quite entertaining. But it's just his opinion. Right? When he I get a kick out of it. It's not.
Yeah. Well, I just think, from my perspective in dealing with this, and kind of why I wanted to engage in this whole thing, is just because I think what we're seeing is this elitist mentality that like guys like Durbin feel like they're above the rest of everybody, and as long as they can hold on to their power, and again, this is my opinion. So as long as they can hold on to their power and they keep any criticism down, they silence opposition, they continue to hold on to their power. Jeff Durbin is not above God's word. Jeff Durbin, or any pastor, is not above God's word. God's word is just that. It's the word of God. So that's God's standard, and that's what we all have to hold to. And so just because you're a famous pastor, just because you've been doing something for X number of years, does not all of a sudden mean that then discredits what God's word says about the qualifications of a pastor or qualifications of an elder. And the fact that they're continuing and digging their heels in and being unrepentant, all while defending their abusive tactics in order to try to silence and discredit you, that's kind of why I wanted to touch on this, because I think that this is in my opinion, a wider, broader principle that I think that pastors and churches and even congregations need to remember, that just because your pastor's famous or just because you enjoy your pastor's preaching does not invalidate God's word on the qualifications of a pastor and elder. Like, they still need to hold themselves to the same standards that they expect you to be held to as well. And I think that's an important principle for us all to remember. Even a higher standard, right? Exactly. So, and then let's see. I'm just looking to see if there was any other questions coming up on Facebook. We've got a bunch of comments, but not as many questions. Besides Dustin Faulkner saying, "LOL, Tim is bald." So, but I think that if we can, I don't know. It's interesting to me with you and I, just how with this issue, we're talking the same language. I know we disagree on other issues, but I think we both see the principle just of some of these tactics being used just in different arenas. And I think that we both agree on this whole thing with Durbin and Apologia and James White. And there's just this level of pride and arrogance, and again, this is just my perspective, but it just seems like it's so that way they can hold on to power and not have to be criticized. And like watching that video of Jeff Durbin continually repeat himself over and over and over for like 2 hours, like claiming that you're lying without actually explaining how, like making all these assertions, making all these claims, and just repeating himself over and over and over again. It was almost like brainwashing. It was almost like, as long as if I can get that number up to over 200, people will believe me. You know what I mean? Like it's nuts.
It was really weird. It was like he has these talking points. I am going to say Tim is a slanderer, admittedly so, a slanderer. He's lied. He's admitted he's lying. He's misrepresented us. Like, it was really weird to watch. And some people at Apologia and people who have left Apologia are like, we recognize the way he's talking, the voice inflection, the way he presents his stuff. We recognize that because that's what's happened to us. I could go on, but yeah, there are things. Your treatment of one person, one ministry, we disagree strongly, and then there's things like with your engagement on interfaith dialogue. I agree with all your conclusions, but I don't agree with your methodology of going after it for so many years. So sometimes I strongly disagree. Other times I just like, I don't think you're going about it the right way, but
yeah. Well, I think that we can also remember too is like we all have different reasonings and motivations and reasons for why we do what we do, and I think that to a certain degree I think that we need to be showing grace to each other and understand that there's different contexts for different people in different situations. So there may be different reasons why they're going about things in a different way than maybe I would do. And so that's where I think that we have to bring it back to what's the biblical principle here. Because you and I both know that there's particular issues that let's say J.D. Hall will go after somebody for years over, right? There's things that John MacArthur would go after people for years, decades over. The length of time to me isn't as much of an issue as what's right or wrong, and is it something that needs to be clarified for the church. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I hope your audio is good, Mike. My headset's messed up now.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah, it's coming through okay over here. So,
that's good.
Yeah.
I think, like, if it wasn't for my board and certain members of my board, I would be making multiple videos. A lot more.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons why I'm here is because I don't want to put everything that's been out be about Durbin. And one of my board members is like, be like John MacArthur, like with some of these issues recently, he will address it like he did. And I know you have a problem with the way he did it, but so I'll talk very vaguely. Okay. As ministers with platforms, there is something to be said about, okay, here's the conflict and here's my response to it, and let that stand for itself. That's what I want to do. Like Durbin did his 3-hour rant. I made a 22-minute response. I want that to stand. If anybody ever comes to me again and says, hey, I watched this video where Durbin says you're a slanderer or an abuser and he's a victim and all this other stuff. Hey, here's this 22-minute video. That's my response. And if you're not rational about that, I've got nothing else to say to you.
Yeah.
Like there is something to be said. Let's just go on the record. This is my point. But and then there's something to be said for doing it another way, which is the way that you handle some of your situations where you believe somebody's wrong and you're going to present it at every angle that possible in an attempt to convince as many people as possible. And I'm sure that there are some situations where I would apply that method as well.
Now, right.
But like, what do I want to be? Right? Like, what do what's my purpose for Bible Thumping Wingnut? It's actually not to tear people down. It's actually to encourage people in their faith, to teach biblical principles, and to share how to have a biblical apologetic, how to witness to people, and moving the focal point. Really, I'm trying to get back to what I wanted to do 7 years ago when I started, and that is encourage men to act like godly men, which was really weird because the Builders Summit, the event that I did, the Builders Summit, it's going to be a yearly thing. When 3 months before the Builders Summit, all I did was Builders Summit. I didn't do anything else. I was so stressed and so focused. That's all I talked about for 3 months. Builders Summit is over. The day after the Builders Summit, my apology was posted on an anonymous account. I hadn't mentioned Jeff Durbin's name. Now, maybe somebody could dig up somewhere where I did, and I'm not actually lying. I'm just saying from the top of my head, I have no recollection of mentioning Durbin for 3 months. And that really took me back. But we need to wrap up. Sam wants to know, what is the takeaway for all this? For me, the takeaway is I've noticed, and other people are noticing, Jeff Durbin and his the way he chooses to lead and control people who disagree with him. My takeaway is that this is a big problem, and I want to bring it to light. I don't personally know people in my local area or in my circles of ministry where in local churches that is a prevalent thing. But it's a huge concern for people who are experiencing it right now at Apologia Church. You want to take it broader context and say it's prevalent in in celebrity pastors? Perhaps it is. Perhaps it is more prevalent in celebrity pastors. I just am not under the leadership of any celebrity pastors, so I don't notice it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think this ultimately comes down to what Durbin's doing is unbiblical. If he did it in a different state, from what I understand about the different laws in different states, it would actually be a felony, depending on what state he's in. From what I understand, the state that he's in, it's not. But if he was in, let's say, California, it would be a pretty serious crime.
Most denominations, most churches, if your pastor records members and then weaponizes it, you do not have a job. Yeah. Almost. And I know of no pastor outside of Apologia that says, yes, I record confessions from members. He recorded me. That's one thing. That's unethical, and sharing it was unethical. But he records members. It's crazy. It's crazy. And the Durbinites are like, oh, well, he does it for accountability. Are you kidding me? Like,
yeah. I mean, clearly it's not for accountability.
I pulled all my hair out over this.
Well, I think that for me, the take-home principle in all of this is to remember that ultimately we are responsible to God, and that even if a pastor fails us, like if you're in Apologia and Jeff Durbin is failing you, that's not God failing you. That's your pastor failing you. We can still rest and we can still trust that God is still in control, and turn your back on that abusive pastor. Don't turn your back on God, because God loves you. God wants what's best for you. God saved you. And I think, to me, that's the take-home principle in this as well, is don't forget your faith is with God. Your faith is not with your pastor. So don't turn your back on your faith because your pastor fails you. Turn to God, not away from God. I think that that's an important thing, because a lot of people, if their pastor abuses them or fails them or whatever it is, they turn their back, they leave the church, and they're like, see, Christianity doesn't work. Christianity works. That pastor didn't. That's the difference.
And that's an excellent point. I met with a man who used to teach at Apologia Church. He was highly respected by Durbin. He wasn't an elder, but he taught midweek. I met with him and he told me his story, and I was like, his story is such that everybody else would have just like left Christianity completely. And I just encourage the guy. I'm like, all that happened and you did not walk away. You did not. So, of course, that's what we would expect from mature Christians. We would expect mature Christians to understand that pastors are faulty as well and sin and need to be called to repentance. And you could have a whole church full of bad elders, and a mature Christian will move on and find another good church.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, for sure. So now, as we're kind of wrapping up as well, if people want to be following you or following your website, your podcast network, all that kind of stuff, just share the socials, share your website, all that kind of stuff, in order for people to be able to kind of keep up on what's going on and all that.
There's only one Bible Thumping Wingnut. It's like
you're the one.
if you Google Bible Thumping Wingnut, you can find our website, Twitter, everything, Instagram. My Instagram's actually fun. If you don't want the drama, you want to know like what's behind the actual Bible Thumping Wingnut guy, Instagram's a nice, friendly place. We don't do drama on Instagram.
Okay, there you go.
So we yeah, but Yeah, you can check. We got a lot. We got some. God has surrounded me with some really great guys. Michael Coughlin just started podcasting. These are just regular guys who love the Lord, real smart, real biblically sound, and great communicators. Michael Coughlin's started his podcast on the network. Dustin Seegers is on the network. Adam Staub is on the network. Austin Hessler, a lot of great guys, and it's wonderful to have them as part of, as well as Seth Dunn has a great podcast too. He's actually really entertaining. Anyway, I don't want to take the time to promote. Everybody knows how to find it, and I do appreciate you in this situation, and you responded the way I thought you would. And I appreciate you letting me tell the story to your audience.
Yeah. Well, and again, you and I have had issues in the past. We go back and forth. We I feel like we have our ups and downs and all that kind of stuff. But still, when it comes back to it, right is right and wrong is wrong. And this is definitely one of those issues. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to take this on and have you, and when you reached out to me to come on, I was like, yeah, because again, this is one of those, to me, black and white issues that needs to be dealt with.
And if we're done here, I'm going to go block you everywhere again.
I figured it only lasted the length of the podcast.
I'm just kidding.
So yeah, well,
yep.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, Tim and Sharon, and we'll be following, and if there's something else that comes up, I'm sure we'll be talking. So,
all right, thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Of course, thanks, man.